Inspired by Muhammad, the desert wind howled across the silent valley as a lone man hurried through the darkness, his heart pounding, his breath unsteady. His footsteps pressed urgently against the rugged ground, as if history itself were chasing him. His eyes searched for refuge, but what he carried within him was far heavier than fear. It was a message that would shake nations, transform hearts, and echo across centuries. But this moment did not begin here. Long before the trembling night, before the heavy responsibility, before millions would speak his name with reverence, he was simply a child born into a world that had forgotten compassion. The city of Mecca was alive with movement, yet beneath its busy markets and crowded paths lay a society divided by pride, wealth, and power. The strong ruled the weak. The poor struggled to survive. Tribal conflicts tore families apart. Voices of justice were often drowned by arrogance. In this world, a child entered life already touched by loss. His father had passed away before he could even see his face. His mother, gentle and caring, would not remain long enough to watch him grow into a man. Loss followed him early, shaping a heart that would understand pain more deeply than most. As he grew, he did not grow in comfort or privilege. He learned patience before he learned power. He learned humility before he learned leadership. The world had given him hardship, yet hardship refined him rather than breaking him. People began to notice something unusual about the quiet boy. He listened more than he spoke. He observed more than he judged. He treated others with a fairness rarely seen in a society driven by pride. Years passed, and the boy became a young man known not for wealth or status, but for something far more valuable: trust. Merchants sought him because he never deceived. Neighbors respected him because he never betrayed confidence. Strangers felt safe in his presence because he never used words to harm. They called him the trustworthy. It was not a title given lightly. In a world where promises were often broken, his word carried weight. His honesty became his identity. One afternoon, while the sun cast long shadows across the busy market, a man approached him with concern written across his face. "I have heard about you," the man said cautiously. "They say you never cheat, never lie. Tell me, why do you choose such a difficult path when dishonesty brings faster reward?" The young man looked at him calmly, his voice steady yet gentle. "What is gained quickly can also disappear quickly," he replied. "But truth builds something that cannot be easily destroyed." The man stood silent for a moment, reflecting on the simplicity of the answer. Then perhaps, the man said slowly, "Truth is the strongest wealth." The young man smiled softly, but his eyes showed that his thoughts were deeper than the conversation revealed. While others chased status, he searched for meaning. While others competed for influence, he sought understanding. He could see suffering around him. He could feel the weight of injustice pressing on society. Something inside him refused to accept that life was meant to remain this way. As the years passed, he often distanced himself from the noise of daily life. He would travel away from the crowds, seeking quiet places where thoughts could breathe freely. There, surrounded by silence, he reflected on the state of humanity. Why did people hurt one another? Why did pride destroy peace? Why did power silence compassion? These questions did not leave him. The nights became moments of deep contemplation. The world seemed loud, but truth seemed hidden. One evening, a close companion noticed his quiet concern. "You seem distant lately," the companion said gently. "Is something troubling your heart?" He paused before responding. "I see people searching for happiness," he said slowly. "Yet their actions create suffering. I wonder if there is a better path." His companion nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps those who question the world," the companion replied, "are meant to help guide it." The words lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. Guidance, responsibility, purpose. These ideas stirred something within him, though he did not yet understand the journey ahead. Time continued to move, yet his character remained consistent. People trusted him not only with business, but with their disagreements, their concerns, their hopes. If conflict arose between families, they asked for his judgment. If someone feared being treated unfairly, they turned to him. Even those older than him respected the calm wisdom he displayed. One day, a dispute broke out among several tribes regarding a sacred matter. Voices grew louder. Anger threatened unity. Each group insisted their opinion must prevail. The tension grew so intense that it seemed conflict was inevitable. Then someone suggested a solution. Let us allow the trustworthy one to decide. All agreed. When he arrived, the crowd explained the disagreement, each side hoping he would favor them. He listened carefully without interrupting. His calm presence slowly softened the heated atmosphere. After a moment of reflection, he offered a solution that honored everyone's dignity. The people accepted his judgment immediately. Peace replaced tension. Respect replaced anger. The crowd dispersed, impressed not only by his fairness, but by his ability to unite rather than divide. Yet inside his heart, questions continued to grow. Leadership was being placed upon him, yet he did not seek power. Respect was being offered to him, yet he did not seek praise. He simply wanted truth. Years later, as responsibilities increased, the need for quiet reflection also grew stronger. He withdrew more often to a cave in the mountains, far from distractions. There, beneath the vast sky, he searched for clarity. The silence was not empty. It was filled with thoughts about justice, compassion, and human dignity. He reflected on how society valued wealth more than kindness. He reflected on how the vulnerable were often ignored. He reflected on how hearts could become hardened by pride. Each reflection strengthened his desire for change. One night, as the world rested under darkness, something extraordinary occurred. The air felt heavier than usual. The stillness carried an unfamiliar intensity. A moment arrived that would transform not only his life, but the direction of history itself. The experience was overwhelming. Responsibility descended upon him with a weight difficult to describe. His heart raced. His hands trembled. The realization that his life would never return to normal filled him with both awe and fear. He hurried home, seeking comfort, seeking reassurance, seeking understanding. "I am afraid," he admitted honestly. But he was not alone. Support surrounded him. Encouragement strengthened him. Faith gave him courage. The message he carried was not one of power or control. It was a message of compassion, a message of responsibility, a message of unity. He was called to remind people that dignity belongs to every human being. He was called to remind society that kindness is stronger than cruelty. He was called to remind the world that true success is measured by character. At first, the message was shared quietly. Conversations took place in private. A few listened attentively. Some felt inspired. Others felt uncertain. Change rarely begins loudly. It often begins with small circles of sincere hearts. One follower asked him softly, "Do you truly believe people will accept such change?" He answered with calm conviction. "Truth does not depend on numbers," he said. "Even a small light can remove great darkness." The words touched those who listened. Hope began to grow. But not everyone welcomed the message. Some feared change. Some feared losing influence. Some feared a world where justice applied equally to all. Opposition slowly emerged. Questions turned into criticism. Criticism turned into hostility. Yet he remained patient. He did not respond with anger. He did not answer cruelty with cruelty. Instead, he continued to speak about compassion. He continued to remind people about honesty. He continued to demonstrate dignity through his actions. One day, a man approached him with visible frustration. "Why do you continue?" the man demanded. "People oppose you. They insult you. They reject your words." He looked at the man with calm understanding. "If a person sees others walking toward danger," he replied gently, "should he remain silent simply because warning them is difficult?" The man could not answer immediately. The sincerity in his voice carried more weight than argument. Opposition grew stronger. Challenges became more frequent. But so did the determination to remain patient. The message began to reach hearts beyond the immediate circle. People searching for meaning found comfort in his words. People burdened by injustice found hope in his teachings. People longing for unity discovered a vision of a better society. His life was no longer his own. Every step he took carried responsibility. Every word he spoke carried impact. Every decision he made influenced the direction of a growing movement. The journey was far from easy, yet each challenge strengthened resilience. Each hardship deepened compassion. Each moment of difficulty reinforced the belief that change was necessary. Even those who once doubted began to observe something undeniable. His character remained consistent under pressure. His patience remained steady under criticism. His integrity remained firm under challenge. Such consistency is difficult to ignore. As more people listened, the message continued to spread quietly but steadily. Hope began to replace despair. Purpose began to replace confusion. Unity began to replace division. And though resistance still existed, the foundation of transformation had already been laid. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions do not begin with armies. They begin with sincerity. They begin with courage. They begin with one person willing to stand for truth even when standing alone. And this was only the beginning. He walked through the crowded streets of Mecca, yet his mind was far from the noise around him. Faces blurred past, voices rose and fell, but all he saw were hearts in need of guidance, souls searching for meaning. He paused by a marketplace, where merchants argued over prices and children played among the chaos. His gaze lingered on the suffering hidden beneath the city's apparent prosperity, the widow struggling to sell her goods, the orphan begging silently in the shadows, the man beaten by life's misfortunes. Each scene strengthened the resolve within him. He could not ignore what he saw. The world could not remain in its broken state. A young companion approached, concern written on his face. "Master," he said, "why do you not rest? Why do you burden yourself with the weight of others' troubles?" He looked at the boy with calm intensity. "Because one day," he said, "we will all be accountable. Every injustice ignored, every heart neglected, will weigh upon us. To act is not merely choice, it is necessity." The boy nodded, unsure if he could fully understand the gravity of the words, but he felt the conviction behind them, a fire that could not be extinguished. Word of his message had begun to spread beyond the walls of the city. People whispered of a man who spoke of kindness, justice, and unity. Some were curious, some skeptical, and many opposed him, fearing a world transformed. One evening, a group approached him under the dim glow of a lantern. "Why do you teach what is forbidden?" one demanded. "Do you not know the power of those who control wealth and influence? They will destroy you if you defy them." He did not flinch. His voice was steady, unwavering. "Fear does not dictate truth. Justice does not bend to power. I speak because hearts deserve guidance, because the oppressed deserve relief, because humanity deserves hope." The men looked at him, their anger tempered by the calm strength in his eyes. Some were unsettled, others silently impressed, but all felt the undeniable weight of his conviction. As the months passed, his followers grew, not in numbers alone, but in depth of understanding. They did not merely admire him. They absorbed his teachings, embodying the principles he lived by. Compassion, patience, humility. These were not abstract concepts. They were lessons applied every day. One night, as the desert stretched under a canopy of stars, he gathered a small circle of followers. "Remember," he said, voice soft yet commanding, "true change begins within. If you cannot cultivate justice in your own heart, you cannot bring justice to the world. Start with yourself, and the world will follow." A companion spoke up, hesitant yet curious. "But what if they reject us? What if the world remains deaf to our message?" He placed a hand on the companion's shoulder. "Then we continue. We plant seeds even where soil seems barren. One day, the rain of understanding will fall, and what we have sown will flourish." Time tested them. Opposition intensified. Threats became more frequent. Nights were sleepless, filled with worry for those who stood with him. Yet he never faltered. He endured ridicule, betrayal, and even threats to his life. Each trial was met not with anger, but with steadfast patience and unwavering focus. In one particularly heated confrontation, a wealthy merchant sneered at him. "Do you truly believe your words can change anything? Power and wealth rule this world, not compassion." He replied calmly, "Wealth can build walls, but it cannot mend hearts. Power can command fear, but it cannot inspire loyalty. True strength lies in justice, mercy, and integrity. That strength endures long after empires crumble." The merchant was silent, sensing the weight of truth in his words. Through struggle, his circle of followers became a family, united not merely by belief, but by shared action. They helped the poor, protected the weak, and spread a message of equality. Each act of kindness rippled outward, touching lives far beyond their immediate reach. Even children understood his principles. A young girl once asked, "Why do you help everyone, even those who hurt you?" He knelt to her level, eyes gentle. "Because kindness is not given for reward, and love is not measured by how it is returned. We act rightly because it is right, and in that, the world slowly learns to reflect what is good." The girl smiled, holding on to the simplicity of the lesson as if it were a precious treasure. Years passed, and the movement he inspired began to draw attention from distant tribes and cities. Some came seeking guidance, some came to challenge him, and some came simply to witness the man who dared to speak truth in a world resistant to it. A young man from a far-off city confronted him during a gathering. "Your words are strong," he said, "but do they carry weight against kings and rulers? Do they truly matter in the face of armies?" He looked into the young man's eyes. "An army can conquer lands," he replied, "but it cannot conquer hearts. Influence may command obedience, but it cannot inspire devotion. True change begins with the soul, and when the soul changes, nations follow." The words lingered in the air, and for a moment, the young man felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Conflict, however, remained unavoidable. Those in power felt threatened by his growing influence. Economic rivals feared their status would erode. Religious authorities worried about the disruption of established traditions. Opposition took shape in whispers, in slander, in public challenges. Yet each challenge only reinforced his resolve. On one fateful day, he faced a group intent on confrontation. Their voices were raised, their accusations sharp, their anger palpable. The crowd braced for violence, but he stepped forward with calm confidence, and silence fell. "My words are not swords," he said. "My guidance is not a weapon. I seek no victory through fear, no power through force. I seek only truth, justice, and mercy. Listen, and if your hearts are willing, act rightly. If not, I do not force your understanding, but the truth will endure nonetheless." The tension lingered, but the message had penetrated. Some left in anger, others in quiet contemplation, and a few approached with open hearts. Every encounter shaped him further. Every challenge refined his patience. Every conversation deepened the understanding of human nature. The city itself began to change, subtly at first. Acts of compassion appeared in unexpected places. Neighbors assisted one another more readily. Families who once quarreled found reconciliation. Even those skeptical of his message began to mirror the principles they observed in his followers. At the heart of it all, he remained humble. Success never inflated his ego. Recognition never altered his character. He walked among people not as a conqueror, but as a guide, as a companion, as someone who had shared in their struggles and understood their fears. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold across the desert sands, a follower asked him, "Master, how do you bear the weight of so many hearts depending on you?" He looked out at the horizon, where light met shadow, and responded softly, "The weight is heavy, yes, but it is not mine alone. Every soul that seeks truth shares in this journey. Every heart that chooses kindness lifts the burden. We are not solitary in this work. We are connected, and together we endure." And in that quiet, reflective moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind paused, as if acknowledging the enormity of what was unfolding. A single life dedicated to changing the world forever. The nights that followed were often restless. Threats of harm continued to surface. Yet he found solace in small victories. A reconciled family, a healed friendship, a mind open to understanding. Every act, no matter how small, was a step toward the greater transformation he envisioned. Sometimes, he would gather his followers in the dim light of a simple home, and together they would recount stories of courage, endurance, and mercy. Laughter occasionally broke through the somber tone, a reminder that joy and hope were inseparable companions of perseverance. One evening, during such a gathering, a young boy whispered, "Will we ever be strong enough to change the hearts of all people?" He smiled gently, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We may not see the end," he said, "but we plant seeds that will grow long after we are gone." Patience is not merely waiting. It is trusting that the right time will come. The boy nodded, inspired to continue, to strive, to act with courage. Across the desert and beyond, stories began to circulate about this man who did not wield swords, who did not chase wealth, who did not crave power, yet who was transforming lives with words, actions, and character. His name spread quietly but persistently. Even those who opposed him could not ignore the subtle revolution of hearts occurring around him. And as the story of his life continued to unfold, it became clear that the man walking through deserts, marketplaces, and homes was not simply living a life. He was igniting a legacy. The legacy of compassion over cruelty. The legacy of justice over oppression. The legacy of courage over fear. The legacy of one man who would change the world forever. If you want to continue the story and witness the pivotal moments that cemented his place in history, stay tuned for the next part. And don't forget, if this story inspires you, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing what resonates with you most. Your engagement helps keep the story alive and spreads the message far and wide. The world around him was shifting, slowly but unmistakably. Word of his teachings had reached distant tribes, carried by travelers and merchants who marveled at the calm courage of the man who spoke truth without fear. Some came out of curiosity, others in hope, and a few with hostility lurking in their eyes. But all were drawn to him whether they realized it or not. One day, a man from a distant city arrived, his robes dusty from travel. He approached cautiously, scanning the crowd before stepping forward. "I have heard of you," he said, voice edged with skepticism. "They say you speak of justice and compassion. But how can one man's words stand against generations of custom and law?" He looked at the visitor, calm and steady. Custom can bind hands, law can control action, but neither can bind a heart. When hearts are transformed, customs follow, and laws serve what is right. You will see, if you listen with honesty, that the smallest truth can grow to conquer the greatest falsehood. The visitor hesitated, then nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. And with that, he joined the small group of followers who had begun to coalesce around this man of unwavering character. Yet the path was far from easy. Opposition had grown bolder. Powerful merchants and tribal leaders saw his influence as a threat. They whispered in crowded markets, questioning his motives, warning the people to resist his message. But every attempt to silence him only reinforced the sincerity of his followers. They witnessed not just words, but actions that reflected deep moral conviction. One day, a group of influential men confronted him openly in the marketplace, their voices loud and accusing. "Your teachings disrupt order. Your followers challenge our authority. You cannot be allowed to continue." He stood calmly among them, the crowd parting slightly as if instinctively making space for someone beyond ordinary power. "I seek not to disrupt," he said. "I seek only to remind people of fairness, of kindness, of dignity. If order is built upon injustice, it will crumble. If authority is enforced through oppression, it will decay. Change begins not with fear, but with conscience. You may resist me, but conscience cannot be silenced." The men faltered, unsure how to respond to a man who wielded no sword yet commanded such respect. A murmur spread through the crowd, some in doubt, some in wonder, all aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Night after night, he would retreat to solitude, reflecting on the challenges ahead. A companion asked him one evening, "Master, how do you bear the weight of constant opposition? Do you not grow weary?" He looked up at the stars, their cold light illuminating the desert in a soft glow. "Weariness is natural," he admitted, "but when purpose is clear, it carries us beyond fatigue. Every challenge is an opportunity to strengthen resolve, every obstacle a lesson in patience. The path is not easy, but the journey is necessary." Even in the midst of struggle, he never lost sight of compassion. A poor woman, shivering in the night, approached him for aid. Without hesitation, he gave what he could: food, shelter, reassurance, and encouraged his followers to do the same. "Help where help is needed," he instructed them. "Do not turn away because opposition looms." The small acts of mercy ripple far beyond what we can see. Stories of such acts spread quickly, and soon, people began to approach him not only for guidance but for inspiration. A young boy asked, "Master, will the world ever understand your teachings?" He smiled gently, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Perhaps not all will understand immediately, but hearts that are ready will hear, and hearts that hear will act, and those actions will ripple outward." Change is a patient work, like planting seeds and waiting for rain. With each act, his circle of followers grew stronger. They were no longer merely listeners, they became practitioners. Families reconciled, disputes resolved, and small communities began to mirror the values he espoused. Even those initially hostile found themselves quietly transformed by observing consistency, fairness, and mercy. Conflict, however, continued. Tribal leaders and merchants, threatened by the growing influence, plotted to intimidate him. Night visits, insults, and threats became frequent, yet he never faltered. One evening, a man came to confront him with anger barely contained. "Why do you persist? Do you not see how many oppose you? They will crush you." He met the man's gaze calmly. "If I were to act only in safety, I would have abandoned justice long ago. Fear cannot dictate righteousness. Every act of truth strengthens those who are willing to listen. Opposition is not failure, it is a measure of impact." His words, firm yet compassionate, planted seeds of reflection even in the hearts of those who opposed him. Some left angered, but others began to question, silently, what it was about this man that commanded respect without force. As his teaching spread, his followers encountered dangers that tested their faith and courage. One night, a group of men set fire near the gathering spot where they met. Panic could have overtaken them, but he calmed the group with a few quiet words. "Do not fear fire outside when your hearts are already strong. Courage is born from conviction, not circumstance." The group rallied, helping those in danger, rescuing possessions, and ensuring no lives were lost. The act of courage and compassion became a story in itself, carried by travelers to neighboring towns, further amplifying his influence. Time and again, he demonstrated that leadership was not about authority but integrity. One day, a follower who had faced ridicule for standing by him asked, "Master, why do people trust you when they see us suffer for your cause?" He looked deeply into the young man's eyes. "Because sincerity is visible, compassion cannot be hidden. Even in hardship, truth shines brighter than falsehood. People may oppose you initially, but those willing to see clearly will recognize what is genuine." The movement began to grow in earnest, not through coercion, not through force, but through the magnetism of a life lived consistently in truth. Families, tribes, and communities that once ignored injustice began to emulate the principles he embodied. And yet, despite the growth, he remained humble. Recognition never swelled his pride. Influence never tempted him to self-interest. He walked among the people not as a ruler, but as a guide, as one who had experienced suffering and understood it intimately. One day, a young girl approached him, timid yet determined. "Master," she whispered, How do we know our actions matter when the world is so big and cruel? He knelt to her level, speaking softly but firmly. Every action matters. Every choice to be just, every act of mercy, every moment of patience. It all ripples outward. The world is shaped not only by rulers, but by those willing to do what is right. You are never too small to change the world. Her eyes widened with understanding, and she ran to share the lesson with her family, her community, and others who would carry it further. As months turned to years, the reach of his teachings expanded, touching people far beyond his city. Tribes once divided by feuds began to reconcile. Families who had been torn apart by greed or pride found common ground. Individuals who had despaired in silence found hope. Through all of this, he remained steadfast in his commitment to justice, compassion, and patience. The desert, the city, and the mountains all bore witness to a life lived in unwavering purpose. Even at the peak of influence, he never demanded obedience. He never sought fame. He asked only that people listen, reflect, and act with sincerity. Those who accepted the guidance did so willingly. Those who rejected it did so by choice, but none could deny the power of his example. The legacy he was building was not of conquest, nor of dominion, but of transformation. Hearts were changing, communities were healing, lives were being reshaped, and even those who opposed him could feel, in quiet moments, the pull of what was undeniably just and true. One evening, after a long day of guidance and counsel, he gathered his followers and spoke quietly. Do not measure success by wealth or power. Measure it by hearts touched, by lives uplifted, by truth maintained in the face of challenge. That is the work that endures. The words settled over the group like a gentle wind. Eyes glistened with emotion. Hearts felt both the weight and the inspiration of responsibility. And as night descended, the desert stretched infinitely, a mirror to the boundless reach of one life dedicated to purpose. The man who walked among the people, who taught through patience and action, who inspired without coercion, had begun a transformation that would echo across generations. The story was far from over. Greater challenges awaited, greater victories lay ahead. And through it all, the principles of compassion, integrity, and patience would continue to guide every step. If this story has moved you so far, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to follow the journey till the very end. Share your thoughts on the lessons you find most inspiring. Your engagement helps the message reach more hearts and minds across the world. The following months were a test of resilience, faith, and unity. His followers had grown in number and conviction, yet opposition had not waned. Every day presented challenges that demanded patience and courage. Threats whispered in the markets, letters filled with veiled warnings, and occasional confrontations that could have erupted into violence. All tested not only him but those around him. One day, a messenger arrived with urgency etched in his face. Tribal leaders are meeting, he said. They plan to confront you publicly. They say your influence grows too strong. They want to force you into submission. He paused, his gaze calm yet piercing. Fear cannot dictate our path, he said softly. We act in truth, and truth cannot be silenced. As he approached the gathering, a crowd had already assembled. Some curious, some hostile, some skeptical, but all attentive. The air was tense, anticipation gripping the audience like a physical force. Voices called out, challenging his presence, questioning his authority. A tribal elder stepped forward, voice booming. You speak of justice and compassion, but who gave you this right? You are young, untested by governance, inexperienced in leadership. How can you presume to guide us? He faced the elder steadily, the sun casting long shadows across the gathering. Leadership is not claimed through age or wealth, he replied. It is earned through character, through integrity, through actions that reflect truth. I ask not for your obedience but for your reflection. Consider not who I am, but what is right, and judge accordingly. The crowd murmured. Some scoffed, others whispered agreement. The elder's expression hardened, yet he could not dismiss the quiet authority radiating from this man. The tension was palpable, and for a moment, it seemed the entire assembly held its collective breath. A young woman from the crowd, her voice trembling, spoke up. "We have suffered under disputes, injustice, and betrayal. Can your words truly guide us to a better life?" He looked at her with empathy. "The path is not easy," he said. "Change is never immediate. But when hearts are willing, when actions are guided by sincerity, communities can heal, families can reconcile, and the oppressed can find justice. It begins with one step, one choice, one act of courage." Slowly, the murmurs shifted. Skepticism gave way to contemplation. Some in the crowd began to see not a challenger to their authority, but a teacher offering guidance. Even those who had opposed him found themselves questioning the rigidity of their previous beliefs. As the meeting concluded, a few approached, seeking counsel, advice, or simply to witness more closely the man whose life was reshaping theirs. The seeds planted through years of patient effort were now beginning to sprout. But the journey was far from complete. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate compassion and resolve. A follower, overwhelmed by the weight of expectation, approached him one evening. "Master, how do we continue when the opposition grows stronger? How do we maintain hope when threats loom everywhere?" He smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "We continue because the work is greater than any one of us," he said. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act rightly despite it. Every act of mercy, every commitment to justice, strengthens the world in ways we cannot always see. Trust in the process, trust in the hearts that are ready, and do not falter." Days turned into months and months into years. His influence expanded beyond Mecca, reaching neighboring towns and distant tribes. People traveled for days to hear his words, to witness his example, to be inspired by his life. Each encounter, each conversation, each act of kindness became a building block in a growing movement that emphasized justice, mercy, and unity. Even as his message spread, he remained accessible. Children, elders, the poor, and the powerful alike found him approachable. A child once asked, "Master, how can we hope to change the world when it is so vast and full of injustice?" He knelt to meet the child's gaze, speaking with gentle conviction. "The world may be vast, but every small act of justice matters. Every decision to show compassion, to speak truth, to act rightly, ripples outward. One heart inspired can influence another, and soon, the ripples grow into a tide that transforms society. Do not underestimate the power of a single act done sincerely." In moments like this, his followers learned the true depth of his leadership, not through commands but through example. Each act of courage, each choice to respond with patience rather than anger, each instance of mercy became a living lesson. The followers followed his guidance, ensuring no harm came to the vulnerable. The incident, once feared as a disaster, became a testament to disciplined courage and moral fortitude. Word of this reached distant communities, further solidifying his reputation as a man of principle and unwavering integrity. Through every challenge, the essence of his message remained consistent: compassion, justice, patience, and humility. These were not merely teachings to be recited, but values to be lived, embodied in every action and decision. Over time, he witnessed transformations that would have seemed impossible years earlier. Families long divided reconciled. Communities once driven by pride and conflict began to cooperate and support one another. Individuals who had lived in despair found hope and purpose. He often gathered his followers to reflect on the lessons learned. "Remember," he would say, "the world changes not in a day, not by force, not by fear. It changes when hearts awaken to truth. We must be patient, persistent, and unwavering in our commitment to what is right. That is how enduring transformation is born." One evening, a young woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "Master," she whispered, "you have changed my life. I now see a path I never imagined. How can we help others to see it too?" He took her hand gently. "Live it," he said simply. Show the way through your actions, not just your words. Compassion, honesty, patience, humility. These are the lights others can follow. Influence is not forced. It is earned by integrity. When hearts see genuine truth, they cannot help but follow. As years passed, the movement he inspired became a beacon of hope and guidance. Tribes once torn by rivalry, communities once mired in despair, individuals once lost in confusion, all found resonance in the principles he taught and embodied. Even those initially opposed to him could not ignore the profound impact of his presence. The calm strength, unwavering patience, and steadfast moral clarity he displayed challenged assumptions, softened hearts, and inspired reflection. In his quiet moments, he would gaze over the desert, reflecting on the journey. The challenges had been immense, the opposition fierce, yet the fruits of perseverance were visible. Lives were being transformed, communities were healing, hearts were awakening, and he knew the work would continue beyond his lifetime. The principles he lived by, the integrity, the compassion, the courage, would endure, carried forward by those willing to act rightly and sincerely. The man who had once walked alone through a world of injustice and division had become the catalyst for a movement that transcended generations. His life was proof that one person, guided by unwavering commitment to truth and compassion, could indeed change the world forever. As this story draws to a close, remember that his journey was not about conquest, fame, or power. It was about transformation, patience, courage, and love. The lessons that remain as vital today as they were centuries ago. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to continue exploring stories of courage, integrity, and life-changing lessons. Share which part of the journey moved you most, and let the message ripple outward through your own actions. Because the world changes not by force alone, but by hearts willing to embrace truth and act with compassion.